Okay, so our next session is called Igniting Growth, and this is going to be kind of a fireside chat. And we have Bruno Estrella, Head of Growth Marketing at Clay, Ariana Tiwari, Director of Product Marketing at PandaDoc, and Jake Schapiro, the Strategic Alliances Manager at PandaDoc. And they're going to be giving you some unplugged insights into marketing and sales strategy. So we're just going to take a little bit, get some chairs set up here and get them mic'd up, and then we're going to get started.
There we go. That sounds pretty nice. Cool. Hey everyone, welcome. So yeah, we're gonna chat through top of funnel leadership. We're gonna go through all things kind of marketing and moving people through the funnel, and you'll learn how we do that at Clay and at PandaDoc. So let's just start with, how do you guys do marketing at Clay?
Cool. So nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Bruno. I run growth marketing here at Clay. Before that, I was running growth marketing at Webflow. And so Clay, like if you just take a step back, like you probably saw what Everett just did, and it's a very flexible and powerful tool. And we basically help a lot of people go through different types of workflows much faster. And on my earlier life, I was an agency owner as well. And I literally had like a 39-page process doc that I used to follow to launch some sort of campaign that I can do in 10 minutes in Clay today. And because of that, because of the flexibility and power of the tool, what we learned is that the product really enables service providers to actually look much smarter. So they go through the Clay, they create different types of workflows, and the tool makes them look good. That's something that we learned through this past year. And so a lot of our marketing is focused on our partner-led motion. And how can we enable our partners to create content that, one, make them look good, and by nature, it'll make us look good, because the tool typically is Clay. So we've invested quite a lot in our ecosystem. This past year, we grew to over like 100 agencies. We have a lot of people creating content on our creators program, and a lot of people creating templates on Clay. So we focus quite a lot on enabling our partners to distribute content about Clay in the different use cases that they go through.
Cool. Okay, so at Clay, it's a lot of through partners. It's a lot of using this ecosystem to market for you. Ariana, how is that different from at PandaDoc or similar? How does that compare?
Yeah, thanks, Bruno. That's fascinating. Ours is a little bit different, and I'll start by kind of zooming out to one of the things that I think is pretty special about the way our marketing team is set up at PandaDoc, which is that our marketing and our sales teams actually both roll up under a revenue org. It's kind of the dream for a lot of companies, right? You're sitting on the same org structure as your sales counterparts, which means you're moving more or less in lockstep on a good day. So when you think about partnerships, it seems like that is actually one of the biggest pieces of your marketing strategies through your types of partnerships. Whereas for PandaDoc, it's actually much less, and Jake can attest to that working on the partnerships team, but it's more of a piece of our overall puzzle, which centers more on our sales team. We are more a sales-led company and rely on inbound and outbounding through that sales team versus our partnerships. And with our partners, we actually go much deeper with a fewer set of partnerships. So forming those alliances with, places like Microsoft, HubSpot, and really narrowing in on the co-marketing that we do with them versus very broadly focusing on implementation partners.
Okay, cool. So we've got Clay, a lot of agencies, affiliates, partner marketing. We've got PandaDoc, a lot more of that kind of direct marketing and sales alignment there. What about nurturing people through the funnel? So someone finds out about Clay, they're like, cool, this seems like a neat tool. How do they actually move through and become a customer?
Yeah, so we have two main motions. We have our self-serve motion, and we have our enterprise motion. The enterprise motion is very similar to what you were describing. Through the self-serve product, these typically attract like smaller startups, smaller service providers. So for us, it's like, one, how do we build this like user-generated content motion that attracts them to go into our site? And then as they are trying to learn Clay, how do we identify that these people are activated into our product? And in this case means, do they actually understand what Clay does? And it's very similar to a typical B2B sort of like flow where like you have a marketing qualified lead and then you might have like a sales qualified lead. The only difference that with Clay in a self-serve model, the product is the thing that is actually qualifying people. So we have with our data team here, like if someone actually builds a table that has this many rows and this many columns, we know by doing a bunch of the regression models that these people are likely to retain in our product long term. So we identify how can we bring people that will then learn Clay by themselves. But from like a self-serve perspective, that means how can we build self-serve learning, right? So we have Clay University, and in my previous role at Webflow University was a massive investment for the company. So same thing here. We're investing quite a lot we have like a studio right there where people film and teach Clay. And same from a documentation point of view. How can we actually build documents that enable people to learn Clay themselves? And so we have the content that serves as a kind of like the foundation. And then our role on the growth marketing team is like, how can people actually find this content through lifecycle marketing or email or through SEO to make sure that they actually learn Clay themselves. On the enterprise side, these companies are much larger, like Everett was saying, OpenAI, Anthropic. So they just can go ahead and self-serve into Clay. So it's much more of like a typical B2B motion where you sign up, then you go through like a procurement process, and then we onboard them through like our CSM team, and then teach the product like a typical motion. But yeah, on the self-serve side, it's much more like a high-scale point of view.
Yeah, it sounds like essentially they find out about Clay, they come in, they dip their feet into the product, and then you guys are just making sure they're successful using it, they're learning about it, and like you said, being activated so that they can really, grow and then buy.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, okay. What about at PandaDoc?
Yeah, we aspire to user-generated content. We have not cracked that one yet. We rely a little bit more on our own leadership to post thought leadership pieces and use that to kind of target our ICPs. But if we could get to that user-generated content, it would open a lot of doors for us. So I'll chat with you after. But we heavily rely on our leadership team to go out there and talk about how they're using our product, PandaDoc, which document management solutions all the way from doc creation, templates, signing, approvals, payments, all the way through end to end in their own lives, in our own revenue operations groups, in our own sales teams, et cetera. And so that's been one of the pieces that has worked really well for us, explaining how individuals are actually using PandaDoc. When it comes to things like trials, we have both a self-serve and a sales assist motion, and most of our trial nurtures are focused around personas. So when you sign up for PandaDoc, we're gonna ask you, who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. What team do you sit on? And we're gonna tailor your trial experience to that particular persona, serving you the workflows that you need to get set up as a salesperson or as an HR person, suggesting documents, suggesting the templates you might need to get started. On the flip side, we're going to actually nudge you to use the product in the way that we know you're going to get value from. So kind of a dual nurture, both in terms of persona and use case specific, and then also taking those product actions that we know is going to get you to value faster and push you towards conversion.
Okay, so it sounds like at PandaDoc, it's really this, now that you found out about PandaDoc, here's how people just like you use PandaDoc, here's how we use PandaDoc, and then really pushing them through the product in a way that's, you know, catered towards them, instead of, say, this academy of learn whatever you want. It's really a more, we're pushing you down the right lane for you.
Yeah, a little bit more of a push, but responding to the way that they're using the product.
Right.
So if we notice they're doing something, we will kind of, mood lighting, tailor our suggestions to be more in line with the way that they're moving. And it's always this push and pull of how much do we show you versus how much do we see what you're doing and then actively suggest things based on that.
Totally, like explore the product, but with some guardrails so you don't get
A little
lost.
bit of guidance.
Yeah, okay. Ariana started to talk about that trial nurture experience at PandaDoc. Tell me more about, like, you're in a trial of Clay. What does that look like?
Yeah, with on a trial experience at Clay, we have like a 14-day trial. We call like a reverse trial. Became like a known term recently, which you have access to everything in the product with a limited amount of credits that you can spend, and then, but if you run over that period of time, you can continue to use the product, but with a limited amount of credits as well. And we do a very similar approach where, like, we identify who these people are that are signing up to the product, and in that case, we try to identify the use case as much as possible, because Clay is very different the way to use for like an outbound motion, but for like an inbound motion, and depending on who you are, the product is very different as well. And so we try to segment our email campaigns based on the use case. So if you're doing for outbound, you should actually start here. And for example, we use Clay internally to enrich our inbound motions. And if you're using HubSpot as your CRM, we nudge you to actually, you should actually connect to HubSpot as soon as possible. Versus like, we want to recommend you to connect with Salesforce, you know. So like these sort of nudges of personalization is what we found to make a difference. On the trial experience, like one recent experiment that we ran, and something that I've seen historically is like the first time they land in the product itself, it's very important for you to remove as many distractions as possible and really focus on the core action that you want them to take. Like our control group, so which was like the regular experience that we had a bunch of links to a bunch of different types of resources for them to explore, but then we knew that first you just need to import some data. And like, we're only gonna show you this. After you do that, and after you build your own tables, thinking of like, we're trying to get them activated as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Then you can like go back and see everything else. So it's very much focused on like where you are from a learning point of view, and what are the things that matter to you based on the use case that you have.
So I'm hearing a lot from both about this kind of ramping people into their trials, right? Like, you sign up for a trial and it's not just yours to explore. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but we're gonna help you get connected and take those first steps to make sure that this trial experience is successful. One thing I heard about Clay that was really interesting is this like reverse trial you were talking about. So you come in and you can use all of the bells and whistles. There's limits and credits, but anything within the product you want, the highest level of the product is available to you, instead of starting on this base level product. And if you want more, then you have to pay or upgrade.
Exactly, yeah.
Is PandaDoc doing something similar? What's a trial of PandaDoc like?
We've experimented with reverse trials a couple times, and depending on the day and what experiment you're in, you might see a reverse trial and you might not. Trials work very similarly. 14 days, try out the product, and what we really find is that there is one particular action that if you take that during a trial, it's going to give us that signal that you're going to convert to a paying customer. It's really making a template. If you plan to use a document more than once and you make that into a template, you're sticky. We got you. And so that is what our goal is to get you to that action, which not everybody is going to take. Not everybody is our ICP who starts a trial, and that's totally fine. But our goal is to narrow in on the ones who are, and then to help them get to that value as soon as possible, and figure out whether this is a tool that they want to stick with. And so there's, again, that push and pull. You might just recreate the same document 100 times during your trial and never make it to the template. That's okay. But if you do, that's sending us such a clear signal that you have intent, and that is a use case that we can actually help you out with. And I think narrowing in on that action, what is value in a trial, helps you progress that customer faster.
So at PandaDoc, it's super clear. It's you create a template, we know you're a good fit for PandaDoc. What about at Clay? Do you have a similar, like, this is how we know that you're a good fit?
Yeah, it's Clay is like, it's somewhat different because it's a very flexible product, right? Where you can kind of use Clay for local business prospecting, but also for like a more normal use case with like a B2B SaaS approach. But for us, like at the end of the day, we are a data product. So like looking back at that table that we mentioned, that like, oh, this table has more than 10 columns and more than 10 rows. This shows us that you actually took the time to explore different types of enrichments in the product, and you also like added more data in here. So it's a signal for us that you are understanding the product within that trial period. And yeah, that's sort of like what we pay attention to.
So Ariana, how do you push someone to create a template, right? They're in this trial, they're creating documents, but we know that templates means you're sticky. How do you get someone to create a template?
It's hard. It's tough, but we do it a couple different ways. Once you sign up for a trial, you're gonna there's emails, there's that part of it. You're gonna get prompts inside of the product, and you're gonna get served content that will help you get to that action faster. Whether that's in-product content, so pop-ups or suggestions, tool tips that guide you through how to actually save something as a template. Emails that kind of build on each other in a learning cadence. And whenever you are actually accessing the same document a couple times, we're going to point you in that direction to help you save time. What we are working on getting absolutely perfect, which it's work in progress for sure, is the use case specific value for that template. So if you work in HR, for example, the value of saving a template for onboarding is very different than the value of saving a template for a sales rep, right? And explaining that very clearly in a limited amount of screen space or email space is something that we're still iterating and experimenting on, so that you understand why the template is valuable for you. Not for you and not for you, but for your specific use case in your job. How does that save you time?
Okay, so we've got this whole top of funnel we've been discussing, everything from finding out to actually coming in, and then this nurture experience, et cetera. What are the metrics that you pay attention to through this funnel, and what's the hardest metric to influence?
Yeah, for us, like hardest metrics tend to be like the more lagging metrics, right? That's why, for example, we created this like activated workspace metric, which is basically we try to take this like, this person is going to become a customer as the lagging metric, and is that something that we can actually signal very early in the funnel, right? So like the more lagging things are more difficult. So like paid customer, especially for a freemium product, like conversion window between you sign up to becoming a customer tend to be kind of long. So we need to sort of like figure out like how can we actually identify signals that enable us to move fast as an org, right? Something that we really value here at Clay is like how fast can we move as a product and as a marketing team. We're in a very crowded space, even though the product is a little bit different. When you talk about even like data enrichment, there's like players in data enrichment for like I don't know how many years. So we need to be, one, the product needs to be very innovative, but from a marketing org, we need to push speed as much as possible. So with speed, the thing that drives speed is the inputs, right? So from a top of funnel perspective, because we grow through user-generated content, we monitor very closely how many people are posting about Clay on social on a weekly, daily, or monthly basis. How can we actually run experiments to get them to post more? For example, one experiment that we ran, we have our creators program, and these people are people that are getting started with Clay. They are typically earlier in their career, building their service provider motion, but they want to be in the ecosystem, right? We launched an experiment with a tool called Yarn, and we basically enable people we create a video we actually did that for a HubSpot integration, where like here's how you can use Clay in HubSpot, and we send that to our creators to the mass push, and they record their voice reading like a random piece of text, and we generate a video with their face, their company name, and their voice going through the workflow of a Clay and HubSpot integration, and then we monitor like, okay, what was the lift in people mentioning Clay during that day whenever we did that push, right? So that's like from a very top of funnel, and then we monitor like traffic, did that actually generate traffic, and then signups to our product. Like, well, how is that translating to actual people trying Clay? The one thing that we typically do, that because we have this sort of like user-generated content motion, attribution tends to become a mess. As everyone knows here, attribution is very hard in marketing. And so we try to actually literally ask people how to hear about us, and then the data is very messy, so we try to group people based off of what they said. So from a top of funnel, we monitor the UGC, traffic, signups, then off of these signups, how many of them are actually activating, meaning like learning the product, and then do they become customers? So that's kind of like, and then revenue and churn in general.
You talked about speed, and I think that's a really interesting metric, right? I mean, we've all heard this, time kills all deals, but beyond that, the longer it takes, the more they're going to find out about a competitor, trial another product, et cetera. Yeah. How do you influence a metric like speed?
So this is probably going to go against any sort of like goal methodology that everyone teaches on business schools. Like, oh, you have to have SMART goals. It needs to be measured. It needs to be specific. It needs to focus on the output. But especially on a startup, you have to control the inputs are the things that you can actually control. So from a speed perspective, I want to measure the team on, like, for example, on our SEO team. How many pages are you shipping this month? Like, are you shipping like 40 pages? How many programmatic pages? Are you shipping like 700 pages? We're going to be checking in every week. Like, are you on track? And if you're not, why? But really focus on those actual inputs. Same on the creator side. Same with the paid ads. And same on product marketing. Like, okay, we want to go after this specific part of the market. How many case studies are we shipping? When are we shipping our solution pages? When are we shipping these use case pages? Because for us, it's like we have these like very large companies that we're competing against. We need to beat them at speed and our product, of course. But from a go-to-market perspective, we can control the actual inputs. So we have like if you think of like an OKR, it's like, oh, we have this sort of like objective and reach this number, but like on a weekly basis, our team is very focused on the specific inputs that they can control. Because I think the other piece that happens is like, okay, I can go someone on our brand team with you should drive more direct traffic or more brand mentions. Can they actually control that? Or for some other reason, external reason, we might actually hit the goal because of something happened. So can I actually like influence speed on a day-to-day basis, having them have control over the inputs?
Control the controllables and trust the process. Yeah. And then, of course, track it, right? Don't just trust that it will, but how are these influencing those metrics? Let's flip to PandaDoc. Are the metrics similar? You know, what do you pay attention to?
Yeah, I have the distinct honor of sitting in product marketing and looking across both growth, revenue marketing metrics, and sales metrics because we span the entire gamut. So I'll start at the top. The one that we track pretty closely is branded search. Great indication of awareness and whether some of these thought leadership pieces are actually moving the needle in the way that they're supposed to. From there, checking out unique ICP visits to a lot of our pages. Great indication, again, of are we getting the right people where we want them to go? Is our buyer journey set up correctly? MQL to S1, big one. How long is that taking? And are we actually bringing in the right quality of leads to our sales team, given that we are a very sales-led company? After that, it's really about, metrics like revenue, deal size, and retention. We want these customers in the door, but we want this bucket to be as not leaky as possible. And so when we see, indications like churn going up for specific plans or for particular cohorts of customers, that's a big one that we want to address right away.
Totally. Okay. Attribution, everyone's favorite topic. It's messy everywhere. Talk to me more about, it sounds like at Clay it's especially messy. We've got all these kind of agencies and user-generated content. I don't even know what to ask. Just what does attribution look like?
It's a mess, like you said, and I'm not going to pretend that we have this robust attribution model. Not true. And I spent a lot of time building attribution models, incrementality tests, all of these things, and sort of to try to give the right weight for every conversion and channel in general. My sort of I think people tend to forget how they buy software when they look at attribution models. Because if you look at attribution models, 50% of your conversion came from direct, or it's from SEO. You're like, really? Did you really find me through Google? Or you probably saw a few posts on LinkedIn, you saw someone talking to you about it. And so I think when it comes to attribution, people lack common sense. And I think that's one thing just to lay the foundation. And that's why we rely quite a lot on the self-attributed data, which is okay, you heard from us because for one example, when you look at our data from a click attribution and cookie-based attribution, we see that, like I said, a big chunk is direct, right? But when you compare the two, and I'll recommend having both models actually running, the click-through one with cookie-based and the self-attributed one, and compare the both. And you see that in our case, half of the direct attribution actually is LinkedIn. People heard from us from LinkedIn, they see the content, actually type Clay on the browser and then comes to us and then shows as direct. So that's why we rely quite a lot on the self-reported attribution. And then what we do is on the back end, because self-reported attribution is also a mess, we sort of categorize these people you can do that even with some OpenAI model of this person said this, that means they came from this channel. You can categorize them a little bit deeper, but we rely mostly on our self-reported attribution.
That's fascinating to me because, self-attribution and reporting is, of course, you're trusting whatever the user says. Do they even know where they found it out from, right? It's not objective data. But meanwhile, as you're saying, this objective data, well, it's unlikely that out of nowhere they just typed Clay into their browser, right? They saw something from social media, from content that pointed them to you. And so by using both of these sources, you at least get a more complete picture, and you can kind of parse it out.
Yeah,
That's
interesting.
interesting.
I think the other thing is, for example, because if you always measure by your click-through data, you're gonna absolutely forget about any type of brand activity that you run, right? For example, we ran billboards in San Francisco. Yep. Anecdotally, we see a lot of people talking about it. We see people taking photos, taking selfies. We got a tweet from Ramp's CEO, so that was cool. but like we see the momentum, we can kind of see people talking about it, but we're not going to see making an impact on an actual like click-through based attribution. Sure, like I think like if there's like data scientists and people here, like I've ran like geolocation tests, and you can sort of like have a control group, and you can have different locations to compare, but it's not going to justify. So I think there's like if you're basing your marketing investments only on click-through attribution, you're always going to optimize for the channels that favor this, which tend to be Google Ads, tend to be some SEO, and you're going to forget about like how can I actually generate demand that will influence these other channels in general. Yeah.
I've still never clicked on a billboard. I don't know about anyone else, but yeah. So what about at PandaDoc?
That would be pretty impressive if you had. I'd have questions. I'll take this from a little bit of a different angle because a lot of the same things are true at PandaDoc. I mean, to start, I don't know anyone who has worked at a company where they say, I 100% trust my data.
The audience, like raise your hand and come up here and answer for us. So
there's just no place where your data is clean, organized, trustworthy, no restatements are happening, there are no questions about anomalies, like it's just, that's a given, which is crazy in 2024 that that's a given, but it is. But the way that I'll take this question is a little bit more about how we have solved some of our attribution issues that we've run into in the past, which is really the biggest thing that's made a difference is moving to integrated campaigns. That means is actually organizing a lot of our efforts from growth, demand gen, campaigns across the board, content creation into one overarching campaign where everything is tracked and happening on the same cadence across the board versus silos of experiments of content coming out of disconnected activities, which makes it so difficult to attribute what happened when. And so it's a little bit contradictory because some of that means going slower in order to organize across these teams. But what we found is it first holistically takes a buyer and a customer into account, and second, makes it easier to track because we're all moving towards the same goal with the same theme for the same time period and moving together versus trying to figure out who was running an experiment that week, who else was doing it, find out 7 months later product was also doing their own experiment that coincided with that. And it's like this layering onion until you try to figure out what actually caused that number to go up.
Instead of focusing on which layer of the onion, it's just the whole onion here, right? We have this one integrated campaign, and we're going to focus on doing it together, and that's what's going to drive the needle.
Yeah, moving to that type of model has made my life in product marketing much easier because we see all of the levers working across the board from growth experiments to demand gen to sales plays all together, same time period, planning on the same cadence.
So how do you peel back the layers of that onion and actually start to understand where was it social, where was it ads, where was it within product, or just that doesn't matter?
It does matter because each one of those has their own specific budget and you want to show ROI on each of these particular levers. Each one has their own attribution model, whether that's UTMs or et cetera. But I think what it does is it tells a broader story, right? Not only did we do a campaign on LinkedIn, but we also did a huge outbounding at the same time for those same audiences. So you're never going to know down to the individual hair what made the difference, but you're going to know, did those two things together make a difference? If they did, can we actually dig into what worked? We have the gong recordings, we have the click-through rates, like start to piece together what are the building blocks that got us to that end result.
Okay, so putting these two together, it's using building blocks instead of just a single source of truth. And very similarly, Clay is not using a single source of truth. They're asking users, they're using links, they're kind of saying, what are people telling us, what's the data telling us to form this more complete picture. Again, nobody has attribution figured out. I think that's probably one of the toughest pieces for everyone, but at least combining these different, pieces of attribution to get something more accurate helps get a good picture of it. Cool. We'll take some questions from the audience. We've got a couple minutes. Who has questions?
I might just be cursed. All right, cool. Bruno, you were talking about, and something I really admire that Clay does is your creator program. And you guys seem to have really activated that and then been able to turn it into more of something that becomes more of a flywheel for the rest of what you're doing. And I would love to know more about how you guys, either less how you scale it and more how you have created the impetus for those creators to be able to create a lot of that content and how you equip them to be able to do that for Clay.
So yeah, I think the first thing was we started to notice that people wanted to be more involved in our ecosystem, and we initiated a sort of because we have this really strong community. Clay has more than 10,000 people in our community. Lala on our team, sitting right there. She sort of built this sort of whole ecosystem of events. We have we have 45 events in 4 months for distributed events for our community. So we noticed that there are some people that they're not experts in Clay. They're not actually sort of they have a service provider motion, but they want to get started, and they are starting to show some of these tables that they are building on social. So we kind of realized that, paid attention to that, and sort of the next step is how can we somewhat operationalize this motion to get more people to create content about Clay, because if there's some people creating, there's probably other people that would be interested too. And so that was the main thing. How can we get more people in a semi-automated motion? I think the beginnings of every type of program are very messy, so it has a lot of spreadsheets and everything. And then how can we actually initiate that? So we built this program to, one, attract people that are, and we actually we don't accept everyone into the program. We tend to get people that are, have you created content about us at one point before? And do you know how to use the product? Because we want to centralize the conversation around this, the Clay itself. Right, so we kind of started there, and then the next step is, okay, they are part of this program. What we learned is that people need they need some sort of recognition. So we don't accept everyone, and the people that we accept, we give them badges, we give them Clay figurines, like we saw from Everett, and then how can we incentivize them to create content, right? Then we give them access to tools. We give them access to these resources that I just mentioned on AI. These were the learnings that we kind of gathered that we can sort of incentivize them to create content, and then can we give them then we thought about, well, maybe we can give them revenue share for people that come from them to incentivize them to create more and more content. But initially it was looking at people that are already somewhat doing this. Can we take a step that will help us operationalize this motion a little bit more and sort of have. For now, they're a very big part of our community. They're the ones that we tend to see that they then graduate to becoming an expert, and then at that time they are very plugged into our ecosystem, and that kind of becomes this sort of competitive advantage for our product compared to other competitors in the space. And the other thing that I would mention is, this is somewhat common on a B2C, so Instagram has creator programs, TikTok has creator programs. What we're doing now for our enterprise motion, we are building what we call the guild, which is taking the same principles of this more scaled version into more of a one-to-one approach, so we can tap into enterprise. So basically what we're doing is we know the customers that absolutely love us and work at these larger enterprises, right? Can we get them, but they don't have the time to actually go into a podcast or to to reach out to get them into a podcast or to write a blog post? Can we actually take that busy time from them and place them into a podcast about RevOps, about GTM systems, about business systems. They might talk about us, they might not, but they probably will because we're the ones that place them in there. So that's like another way that we turn into user-generated content for like a less scaled version. And yeah, that's like some of the things that we kind of tactically we've been doing. So in this case, this last one is more of like a marketplace dynamic, right? Like we talk to a lot of like podcasts or bloggers, and then we talk to our customers, and then we try to kind of match them based on what they want to do. And yeah.
I've got one for you, Bruno. So I totally agree with the way that you think about attribution. I've been there. I get it. It's very hard. But my question is, if you're not sort of like staking claim and getting credit for a specific lead or a specific deal, how do you show value of the marketing team to your leaders, and how do you get more budget?
One thing that I would try to do is there's two types of areas on marketing, right? There's like the very top of funnel activities that you do. There might be brand campaigns, content motions, and stuff. And you should be comfortable with leadership that you're not going to be able to track this thing. You're not going to be able to track like a podcast ad versus like a Facebook ad. So I think just like making this distinction already helps. The other thing is looking at a self-reported attribution. You're probably going to, for example, we started to do a lot of demand gen for our own enterprise product the past few months, and we realized that a lot of the things that we were doing earlier this year were contributing to our pipeline goal, even though we're not doing it on purpose. So like people were attending these events, they were engaging with our ads, and so like centralizing this data. The one thing that I would do that, like I know we all, I said that it's a mess. One thing that we do well is we centralize all of the data into one place, like ad engagement data, event data, if they created an account in Clay, de-anonymization on the site, at the account level. So we can kind of look back and, okay, at this account that have a deal, here are all the activities that they went through. They attended this event, they actually clicked on this case study ad that we have, they commented, they reacted to this ad. Like the way that we actually attribute and give weights, I think that's where it gets really hard. But at least we're kind of like tracking the entire activity and we know what they are doing in general. But yeah, I think the main thing is like we shouldn't expect to be a direct attribution for a very top of funnel motion, but we should at least be trying to track all of the activities. Some of them might be self-reported, some of them might not be. That's sort of like how I would start, and then you'll see that things, for example, depending on your go-to-market motion, like an event with like a dinner with CROs in our case, it's very easy for us to attribute on like, okay, this person here they were a prospect, they attended this dinner, they talked to some people, then they moved along. So there are some things that are very much easier to attribute. I think it really depends on the stage of your company too. Earlier this year, or like end of last year, we knew that we want to go very much on awareness, top of funnel motion with Clay. Like everything that we're going to do, we're going to be very aggressive there to like really blow up top of funnel. Before Clay, I was at Webflow. We went through this process, and then at one point, it became much more of like, okay, can we actually look at net revenue retention rates? Can we like make sure that we are maximizing our CAC to LTV motion? So I think it depends on the stage of the company, and be comfortable with this, and so like segment these two efforts in there.
All right, everybody. This is not working either. Either of these? There we go. That's all the questions we have time for. We're going to move stuff off the stage, and then Ariana is going to be right back on.
Thanks, everyone.